A guy wakes up in an ascending elevator inside an unknown facility. With him are supply containers marked WCKD. As he rises to the top, he tries to find out his location, but only gets frightened by some animal growling at him from the outside. When the elevator reaches the top, a door above him opens, and he finds himself surrounded by a gaggle of young men and boys laughing at him. A boy named Gally drags him out and welcomes him, addressing him as Greenie. Confused and frightened, Greenie takes off, but only to realize that he's in a small glade surrounded by huge walls. Later, they put him inside a makeshift prison. A guy named Albie, who is the leader of the group, asks Greenie anything about himself, but he can't remember his name and where he comes from. So Albie explains the situation to Greenie and shows him around. The boys, who call themselves Gladers, are trapped in the glaze, so they grow food on their own and make their own shelters. Once a month, the elevator provides them with essential supplies along with a new boy. Like Greenie, no one remembers anything about their past, but each member eventually remembers their name after 2 or 3 days of arriving at the glaze. He also mentioned that they didn't know who the people controlled the elevator. Then another kid named Newt approaches them. He turns out to be the second in command when Albie is not around. Inside, each boy gets his own job. Some become builders, some runners. A door opens in the giant wall every day and closes every night, which leads to a vast, mobile concrete maze that surrounds the glade. Later, Greenie sees 2 runners returning from the maze and gets intrigued by it. He insists on getting a closer look into the maze, but suddenly gets pushed by Gally, who tells him to stay away from the maze. Because of that, Greenie starts causing a scene and everyone comes towards him. Albie tells Greenie that the maze is too dangerous, and suddenly a gust of wind hits him, and the gate starts closing until they finally slam shut in front of him. That night, the Gladers celebrate Greenie's arrival with a campfire and wrestling. Newt explains to him that the runners are mapping out the maze to find a way out, and must return before sunset. The head of the runners is Minho, the fastest and strongest runner they have. If someone gets trapped in the maze overnight, something called the Grievers gets to them, and they die. So far, no one has been able to find a way out, as the maze changes every night. Then, Greenie gets challenged by Gally, and he puts up a good fight for a rookie. During the match, he falls on his head and suddenly remembers that his name is Thomas. Everyone congratulates him, even Gally, who is glad that he remembers his name now. The next morning, Albie takes Thomas to the Glader wall to officially welcome him. He also makes him carve his name on the wall. Later, Thomas goes to the woods to fetch some fertilizer. During this, he is suddenly attacked by a runner named Ben. Looking abnormally pale and angry, Ben tells him, "It is your fault. I saw you. You did this." He then tries to kill Thomas, but the latter manages to run away. After a while, the Gladers apprehend Ben and realize that he has been stung by a griever. This sting causes tremendous pain and makes one prone to violence. Fearing that he might cause more trouble, Ben is placed in front of the maze entrance, and Minho throws a backpack into the maze. When the walls start to close, the Gladers start pointing their makeshift weapons against him to forcefully push him inside the maze until the walls are finally sealed shut, leaving Ben trapped inside. A moment of silence is seen from the Glader as they lose another comrade, and later Gally crosses Ben's name off the wall. In Thomas's dreams, he sees himself in a lab surrounded by scientists and a woman telling him, "Wicked is good, you have to choose." He also sees himself and a girl about the same age sitting across from each other at workstations, going over diagnostics. The next day, Albie goes into the maze to retrace Ben's path to find out what happened. Thomas gets curious as to why Albie went into the maze when he is not even a runner. Newt tells him that Albie is more skilled than anybody to do the job because he was the first to arrive at the glade. The night is coming, but Albie still hasn't returned. All the boys gather around the entrance to the maze, and the doors begin to close. Just then, Minho appears carrying an injured Albie in his arms. Everyone yells to cheer Minho, but they aren't able to get back in time. So Thomas rushes to help him, but he ends up getting locked out inside with them. Minho congratulates him, saying that he just killed himself. The maze begins to change, and the griever starts roaring louder and louder. Albie is in an unconscious state, and it is revealed that he was stung while inside the maze. Minho and Thomas use vines to suspend Albie's body high above the ground to keep it safe from the grievers. But before they get to tie the vine, a griever starts closing in on them. This scares Minho, and he runs away from there, while Thomas stays with his injured friend. He manages to hide himself and safely ties the vine, but the griever eventually spots him and starts chasing him. The griever looks like a gigantic bedbug with robot legs and scorpion tails. After a long cat-and-mouse chase, Thomas runs into Minho, and they begin navigating the maze with Minho's help. But as the walls are closing in, Thomas gets a brilliant idea and waits for the griever. When it sees him and rushes towards him, he runs as fast as he can towards Minho, and the scene turns to black. The next day, the Gladers gather around the entrance of the maze, hoping to see their friends get back, but unfortunately, they see nobody. As they were all getting away, something made them look into the maze again and see that the trio was alive. They successfully made it out, and Minho tells everyone that Thomas manages to kill a griever. Later, Gally then summons everyone to an urgent meeting. Although most are excited that Thomas killed a griever, Gally expresses concerns over Thomas disregarding the rules that have kept them safe for 3 years. As they continue discussing, the elevator suddenly arrives. To everyone's surprise, it has brought an unconscious girl with a note stating she's the last one ever. She momentarily wakes up and recognizes Thomas before passing out again. Everyone looks at Thomas, and now Gally gets even more angry at him for recent strange things happening. After that, Newt and Thomas discuss the note, telling him that if it's true, there will be no more supplies from the elevator and will eventually make their lives even harder. Later, Thomas insists on going out to inspect the dead creature. He teams up with Minho and other like-minded gladers and secretly ventures out. Upon reaching the location, they retrieve a weird device from inside the griever and return home. The device has an electronic display reading the number 7 and is marked WCKD, the same letters stamped on the supplies. The boys speculate whoever sends these supplies also made the grievers. Unfortunately, when Gally finds out that they ventured out again, he gets enraged. He calls for Thomas to be punished. Newt agrees with him, but only grounds Thomas for a night without food and makes him an official runner. Later, Minho shows Thomas a map of the maze. He admits that he has mapped all of it and there's no way out. Albie decided to hide the truth from others because he wanted to give them hope, and now Minho feels hopeful that they have a chance. He further reveals that there are different numbered outer sections surrounding the glade. Each day when the maze changes, one section opens. Last night, section 7 was open. In the next scene, the girl wakes up and Thomas rushes to meet her. Afraid and confused, the girl has climbed to the top of a tower and is throwing stuff at the boys to keep them away. Thomas introduces himself and she agrees to let him come up. He then explains everything to her, and the girl reveals that she is Teresa. They both recall seeing each other in their dreams and seeing a woman saying wicked is good. Teresa also reveals that she found 2 syringes in her pocket. Thomas speculates that perhaps the syringe could cure Albie's wound. The others think the idea is too dangerous, but since Albie is already on the verge of death, they have nothing to lose. The next morning, Thomas and Minho go into the maze to inspect section 7 with the device they got from the griever. To their astonishment, they find the section still open and the remains of Ben's clothes are also there. Suddenly, the device starts beeping and guides them to a new section. They get to a wide area marked WCKD loading dock that ends up in a dead end, but the device opens a tunnel. Upon inspection, they find slimes secreted by grievers in the tunnel. At this moment, an alarm goes off and the maze starts to change. Everything starts closing and the blades shut one by one, forcing Thomas to follow Minho and barely escapes from the blades. However, the ground starts moving and they run as fast as they can to save their lives. The duo barely makes it back inside the maze. Upon returning to the glade, they learn that Albie has gained consciousness. Albie tells Thomas, "You were their favorite. Why did you do this? Why did you come here?" But before one can understand what he is saying, everyone rushes outside after hearing a commotion. Shockingly, one of the entrances to the maze didn't close, and a loud mechanical noise causes the other 3 gates to open up around them, and a horde of grievers comes out rushing towards them. They wreak havoc in the village and take out more than half of the boys. They hide in one of their makeshift shelter, and the grievers are walking around them. Suddenly, its mechanical tail grabs Chuck, and the other holds him until Albie forces the monster to release Chuck by chopping its tail. However, after a moment, it came back and grabbed Albie. Thomas holds him, and Albie asks Thomas to get them all out of the maze before the grievers take him away. After all of them finally leave, they see that everything is destroyed, and Gally attacks Thomas, accusing him of being a collaborator. The latter doesn't even try to defend himself. He then grabs a griever tail that had been hacked off during the chaos and stings himself with it. He hopes that by doing this, he can remember some important details like Albie did. Later, when Thomas gains consciousness, he recalls working in a lab with Teresa as a scientist. He also realizes that the maze isn't a prison, but a test. The boys were put in incubation tubes and made to undergo a rigorous test. However, they failed to pass and started dying one by one. This annoyed Thomas, so he teamed up with Teresa to take the test and put an end to it. In the present, Thomas apologizes to the boys for putting them through this. He is ready to accept whatever punishment they choose for him, but to his shock, Newt is not even mad. He says that it doesn't matter what Thomas did in the past. What matters is what he does now. Later, as Gally is the new leader of the Gladers, he decides to get Thomas and Teresa in front of the maze entrance. Teresa tells him that vanishing them won't accomplish something, but Gally informs him that it isn't vanishing but an offering. As they grab Thomas up, he fights back alongside his team to stop Gally's group. Thomas offers them to join his team and find a way out, making some of them join in. But when Thomas asks Gally, he says good luck and decides to stay. Thomas soon leads his group to the loading dock area, where they find a griever guarding the tunnel. Thomas tells his team that they will fight and get out or die trying, making everyone motivated and rush towards the tunnel. They fight the griever and forcefully push the monster to the edge, and Teresa chops off its leg as Chuck grabs it, containing the key to the tunnel. However, more grievers come out and attack them, killing a few of the men. At this crucial moment, they realize the code to unlock the door must be the sequence in which the maze normally opens. Minho tells tells Teresa the sequence and types it in. This opens the door and allows everyone to go through it just before the walls crush them. The kids then walk through a hallway and come across an exit door. Upon entering it, they find themselves in a lab, the same one Thomas had been seeing in his dreams. They also learn that all the scientists are dead. Using his fingerprint, Thomas opens his computer and a video starts playing. The woman in the video introduces herself as Ava Page, the director of operations of the World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department. She congratulates the group for passing the maze trials. She assures them that everything they were put through was done for a good reason. Page further reveals that humanity has suffered from a global devastation by a deadly virus called the flare. It is violent and unpredictable. It was thought to be incurable until a new generation emerged that could survive the virus, igniting hope for a cure. Thomas and his group are that new generation. They were put under the test so the scientists could monitor their brains and find a cure. As she continues explaining more details of the experiment, guerrilla soldiers rush into her lab and start killing other scientists. Now, with little time remaining, Page tells Thomas and the others that they are very important and the outside world is waiting for them. Finally, she reminds them that wicked is good before shooting herself in the head. In the aftermath of this incident, a door suddenly opens, but as the group prepares to leave, Gally shows up with a gun. It shows that he's been stung. Then he tells them that they all belong to the Glade and cannot go anywhere else. He then proceeds to shoot Thomas, and Minho throws a spear at him. However, Chuck jumps in front of the bullet to save Thomas. Now, both the injured boys then collapse to the ground and pass away. Following this, a group of armed men, who look like the guerrilla soldiers from the video, rush in and take the kids to the helicopters waiting outside. The choppers fly above the maze, which is in the middle of a desert. As they fly away, it is revealed that the desert used to be cities, but now buildings are destroyed and everything is covered in sand. In the ending shot, it is revealed that Paige is still alive and she faked her death. She announces to a group of men and women in a conference room that the maze trials were a success. The kids have taken the bait and they could be the key to everything. The movie ends as Paige announces it's time to begin Phase 2,